Hey, before we get into things, please welcome Allie Turner. She's an awesome animator who helped write this script. I'll include links to her work down in the description and stuff. Thanks again for your help, Allie. Anyways,
Hold on. Before we start the video, let me ask. Do any of y'all like Animal Crossing stickers? Well, if you do, you're in luck. My good friend Cheng has some Animal Crossing stickers for sale on her Etsy store. So, check this out in the description if you're interested. Alright, let's get back to the video.
Animal Crossing New Horizons is on the horizon, so let's talk about the mobile game. The gaming industry revolves around adventures, guns, and death. Peaceful games are the gentle eye of the storm in this violent hurricane of Call of Duties, God of War, and Dig Dug. If this was HD, this would be disgusting. Peaceful games often have ambiguous narratives that are more about being in the moment. Now, to be clear, just because a game is non-violent doesn't mean the game is about peace. No other game does this feeling quite like Animal Crossing. Farm crafting games like Minecraft and Harvest Moon also have other elements that add to the stress of the experience. And sim games like Roller Coaster Tycoon and, Sim, introduce levels of power that make the experience more about manipulation. Animal Crossing is a series about your day-to-day life in a small town. The towns are a great place to just be. So how is this feeling achieved? As you may have guessed, that's exactly what we're talking about today. This series has a pretty expansive catalog, but we'll be focusing in on one entry, Animal Crossing Pocket Camp. Add me. Alright, well, why are we talking about a mobile game? Well, for one, it's the most recent iteration leading up to New Horizons. And also, the touch control features actually do a lot to enforce the theme of tranquility within these games. The controls are not perfect, but we'll get into that later. First, we're going to look at what components emphasize the peaceful gameplay in Animal Crossing Pocket Camp. Our core mechanic of focus will be player movement. It's the most frequent action outside of menuing, so walking should both feel fun and support the game's peaceful vibes. And this is the channel's first real dive into game feel. How it feels to play the game. There's no industry standard of what game feel is, but I like Steve Swing's approach in his book, Game Feel, A Game Designer's Guide to Visual Sensations. So we'll be approaching the topic from his general guidelines. Swing describes three key components to game feel: real-time control, simulated space, and polish. We're going to start by looking at polish. This might seem weird because polish sounds like it's the last step, but just trust me on this one. Polish is all about the pizzazz, it's the aesthetic. It has no effect on a player's control of the game, but has everything to do with selling those controls to a player. Now, like I said earlier, you do a lot of walking, so that input has to look and feel good. Let's turn to the wonderful Allie Turner for how this was achieved. Side note, Allie absolutely knows her stuff, so if anything sounds dumb, that's just me trying to make some funny ha-has. Let's jump into animation and talk about some fundamentals first. What is a walk cycle? In animation, a walk cycle is a series of frames or drawings which loop to create the illusion of a walking character. A typical walk cycle consists of a character taking 2 steps in 1 second, or 24 frames. In animator slang, it's on the 12s. Oftentimes, to save time and limit the amount of illustrations that need to be drawn, animators will only draw 12 frames or poses per 24 frames. Essentially, each pose is duplicated or held for 2 frames, therefore on the 12s. Now, a walk cycle consists of 4 key poses: contact, hit, pass, and lift. Animators modify these core elements to deliver unique personalities. For example, changing the timing and holding poses for longer durations can make your character look like they're tired, they have a limp, they're scared, the list goes on. Animators can also lengthen or shorten the overall duration of the walk cycle to control pacing. On top of that, animators can change the spaces between drawings or keyframes. For example, spacing keyframes closer together makes them feel slower, whereas if they're farther apart, they'll feel faster. And of course, depending on what tone is needed or how an animator wants their character to come across, they can change the exaggeration of the posing as well. Anyways, this part was confusing for my dumb brain, so Allie shared a link with me that goes more into detail about this stuff. I'll put it in the description right there. So if you want more information, check that link out. Alright, back to Animal Crossing. In Pocket Camp, the avatar's walk cycle is in between a run and a walk, but it leans more towards a run since it's on 10s. Contact frame 1, hit on frame 3, pass on 5, lift on 6, and contact again on 10. And just for reference, average runs are on 6s. Everything is meant to evoke calming, playful, and cute or childlike nostalgia. The run cycle is meant to subconsciously remind the player of a cute little kid. The run is similarly not too fast, but not too slow. It feels a little floaty. It makes the player feel like they're getting somewhere without being in too much of a hurry. When the run finishes and the player is still, the avatar's hands and head sway back and forth. So cute. On top of that, the subtle sound effects help sell this experience as well. They aren't too gritty. They're somewhere between a squish and a crunch. Overall, Animal Crossing nails polish. The next component Sweet talks about is real-time control. This is a more abstract concept, but in a nutshell, it's the active response to the game. Let me see if I can break this down clearly. When driving a car, the thought process is not, I need to turn left, so I will rotate the steering wheel, which will in turn rotate the tires in the proper direction to turn left. The thought process is simply, I need to turn left, and then you do it. In a game like Mario, the thought process is, I need to jump, and then you jump. The middle step of consciously pushing the button is dropped from our mind because the controls are clear enough that the button fades away. The next step is for the buttons to literally disappear. In theory, touchscreen games tend to run into input issues because there's no medium interface like a button or an analog stick to translate your actions. Now to swing your sword, it requires a more precise input on your end. And sometimes because of how frantic the game is, your input is not accurately recorded. In Animal Crossing, there's a set speed to your character's input, so varying your input speed doesn't change anything. However, because Animal Crossing doesn't have intense time stipulations, the real-time control has some leeway. The input delay of touchscreen actually adds to the lackadaisical experience. On top of that, tapping is functional, but dragging your finger along the screen emphasizes the whimsical feeling the game wants to convey. The last element of game feel is simulated space. It's basically how physical interactions are perceived in-game. There's a lot of factors, like level design, which is space between player and object, clear rules of interaction, how players interact with those objects, and active perception, or how well those rules of interaction are conveyed. And this is where Pocket Camp comes up short. Areas in Animal Crossing Pocket Camp are pretty clearly defined. There are some objects you can collect and players to talk to in a pretty flat space. Unfortunately, while the game clearly conveys the rules of interaction, the touchscreen aspect kinda messes the conveyance up. Players aren't able to operate properly within that space because you got fingers blocking the screen. And for most mobile games, this isn't too much of an issue. However, because of the camera, our field of view shifts and now we're unfortunately dealing with Z-axis inputs. Most mobile games operate on a 2D plane. Even when the game is graphically 3D like an Endless Runner, player input only exists in a 2D space. Because of the camera angle, Animal Crossing Pocket Camp has physical depth to its gameplay. Now, player input is less precise on the upper half of the screen since players are trying to interact with objects that are technically farther away. So now we get to the conflict of form versus function. A top-down camera would have addressed this input problem better, and while it would fix ACPC's issues with simulated space, it would absolutely compromise polish. We would miss out on the animation emphasis on childlike whimsy, and the relationship between characters would lose depth in both a literal spatial sense and an emotional sense. So, what's the point of all this? New Horizons is going back to analog controls, so this whole rant about touchscreen controls suddenly feels less relevant. Even though the Switch has a touchscreen, I'm expecting little to no touchscreen controls. Was this video all a ploy to latch onto something trending in order to gain more followers? Well, in part, yeah. Subscribe to StarTown, of course. But it's also important for games to examine and explore options for interactivity. If this video proves anything, a lot goes into properly conveying how a game feels. Yes, touchscreen has its flaws, but in little details like a dragging input versus a tap input versus analog stick input influences the game feels in subtle ways, just like animation does. I think it's really exciting to explore the nuances of how to make a game feel good to play. Personally, while I do like function over form, this analysis isn't about finding the most efficient, most expressive way to play a game. It's about what makes those moments special and the experimentation that comes with that. I think Animal Crossing is an excellent game to explore those ideas. Because like I said before, this isn't a game about hero's journey or domination. Animal Crossing is about being in the moment. So designers have to make a game about mundane life feel immersive and exciting. So like I said, while I would love for perfect controls and optimized play, yada yada yada, Pocket Camp uses its walking mechanic to better emphasize the feeling of childlike whimsy. Yeah, there are some moments within the game where touch controls feel cumbersome, but for the most part I think they use these shortcomings to their advantage. Anyways, games are cool and super hard to make, so I like to appreciate it when it's done well. We covered a lot today and I'd love to get into this sort of game feel analysis stuff for other games too. So if you have any ideas for that, let me know in the comments below. And most importantly, thank you, Allie, for coming through and helping me with this video. I don't know animation at all, so thank you for coming through and being the expert on that. Be sure to follow her Instagram. She did a lot of really cool work, so check it out there. And while you're at it, like, comment, and subscribe to Startown. My town is going to be called Startown, obviously. Subscribe.
Hello and welcome to the End Slate. In addition to Allie Turner, thank you to all of my wonderful friends who let me visit their campsites to gather some footage. I have a bunch of their Instagrams mentioned throughout the video, and if you want them, they're also down in the description below. And again, if y'all want Animal Crossing stickers, Connie's selling them, and you can find a link to that store down in the description below. Coronavirus got everyone locked up, so I think it's the perfect time to play some Animal Crossing. See y'all later.